was fabulous. That was so good. Oh, you're both so articulate. I love it. You used one of the words. I have a list of words on my computer, my mini computer, and it's words that I know what they mean, but I always forget them myself. So they normally have several syllables. So I've made a list of like words that give me little tingles intellectually, and try and remember them for later to use them. So you've both been doing that. Thank you. Right. So anyway,
welcome.
Shocking. Facebook is playing up, so we'll just record this and then I'll upload it to Facebook afterwards. So righty ho, everybody. Oh, you're right there.
Yeah,
you're so stylish. Okay, here I am in my book standard t-shirt. Righty ho, so I'm just bringing up our list of questions again. Right, everybody, if you don't already know these fabulous people, we have from SUDEP Action, we have Sammy, who's the Deputy CEO of SUDEP Action, and then we also have Jennifer, who is the Research Assistant of SUDEP Action, who are basically contributing to saving and bettering the lives of, well, millions of people affected by epilepsy and SUDEP. Please take it away and tell us about yourselves. Sammy, after you.
So, as Torie said, I'm the Deputy CEO at SUDEP Action. Shall I say a little bit about who SUDEP Action are?
Yeah, please. Yeah, and then how you got into it. Yeah, that would be fab.
Great. So SUDEP Action, we're the only charity who are dedicated to raising awareness of epilepsy risks and tackling epilepsy deaths. We're also the only charity who is specialised in supporting people who've been bereaved by epilepsy. We know that there are 21 epilepsy deaths a week in the UK, and at least 42% of these are potentially preventable. So that's why we as a charity provide free services to help keep people with epilepsy safe, such as award-winning risk tools, information, resources, and we also provide the only free epilepsy bereavement support services, so including things like counselling, support with inquests. And on top of all that, we also collaborate with UK and international research teams to kind of understand epilepsy risks, SUDEP, epilepsy deaths, and the impact that that can have on people who've been bereaved, so that we can hopefully find some answers that will help save future lives. Going to your second question of kind of how do we get into the jobs that we're in. I was originally a teacher and left the teaching profession and decided that I wanted to do something that really had meaning and to continue kind of helping others in some way. I saw this job in my local hometown, based in Wantage, and I thought that sounds like something I could get into. I've got a friend who has epilepsy, and I also lost my cousin who had very severe epilepsy and learning disabilities a few years ago. So the ethos of the charity and the work we do really spoke to me and was a real motivator for wanting to work for the charity.
Brilliant. What about yourself, Jennifer?
So I'm quite similar to Sammy in that I took a bit of a twisty-turny path to get to SUDEP Action, and I actually only started about 6 months ago. And essentially I started doing geography at university and doing sort of environment and sustainability, things like that. But it was also a time where my epilepsy became really difficult. I was having a lot more stress-related seizures. I was missing exams. And it got to my final year and I thought, well, I have the resources to do my own research. And I decided to look into the experiences of other people with epilepsy and exploring health geography, which kind of looks at how different people cope with epilepsy in different places and in different environments like work and school. And then I came across the job posting for SUDEP Action after graduating, and the job posting in itself taught me so much that I didn't know, particularly to do with mortality. And so I spent a good 6 months looking into SUDEP Action and SUDEP before applying.
That is proper interview preparation.
Yeah,
6 months.
I know.
Wow.
Well, maybe not 6 months, but yeah, it was listed for a long time, thankfully, and it gave me a lot of time to look into it. And the more I looked into it, the more I just knew that this job was so important, because if I, as someone who's very educated in epilepsy, was so ignorant of a lot of the issues, it's definitely something that other people need to learn a lot more about.
Totally. And I completely feel you, because I knew nothing pretty much about SUDEP until just before I had brain surgery. So, and which is utterly ridiculous, having taking into account that I'd had epilepsy for over 20 years prior. So that, yeah, you just think of it like that. Wow. Yeah. Reflecting my age there, man. Anyway. Okay. So, we keep using the term SUDEP, but do you know what? I think loads of people don't even know what it stands for. So can you actually tell us a bit about SUDEP itself? What does it mean?
Yeah, so I think this is actually one of the issues, that it is quite under researched and it's difficult to understand. But in essence, it stands for sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And it's when a death occurs and the only cause that can be found from death is that they had epilepsy. And whilst it's not a condition in itself, it's a category, it's a type of death. And it's also one of the most common deaths that accounts for about 1 in 1,000 deaths in people with epilepsy a year. So it causes 1 in 1,000 deaths in people with epilepsy. And we don't really know why it happens. And we think research tells us that it's something to do with the brain, the heart, or the lungs, or some kind of mixture of all three when an event happens. Still not entirely sure. But
by event, you're not quite sure what that event necessarily is. It might be a seizure, or it could be, who knows? Is that right? Or?
Yeah, it could be like a heart palpitation, you know, issues in how the heart pumps around the body, any kind of failure in one of those organs in some way. I'm perhaps not at liberty to go into too much of the science, but what I can tell you is that we think about 40 to 45% of these deaths can be avoided, and Sammy can go into more of the details on how we can avoid the risk, but primarily it's about engaging with your clinician and keeping them up to date with how you're feeling and what kind of symptoms you're presenting, maintaining a steady and stable medication regime that is working for you, and just being aware of risk and doing what you can to reduce the number of seizures you have, which in turn can reduce your likelihood of death and mortality from those seizures.
Gosh, the word mortality is just, I was going to say it sounds so awful, but there isn't really any other way to put it, and kind of death isn't.
I know,
it's awful. So, but it's the word to use. It's just, yeah, it reminds me of geography class. But thing is, we're talking about death as a result of epilepsy. So Sammy, you're going to elaborate for us.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point there, Torie, that kind of this is a scary and can be a really worrying topic. But what's important to know is that there are positive things that people can do. There are steps that people can take that can help give you that control, help give you that confidence, and help you take key actions to help reduce any risks that you may be facing. And I think knowing about the fact that epilepsy can be fatal for some people and that there are these risk factors, while it's worrying, it also then gives you that confidence that you can kind of do something about it. And while we don't know really yet what causes SUDEP, we do know that there are a number of risks linked to epilepsy deaths, either from SUDEP or from other causes, such as suicides, accidents, drownings, or status epilepticus. So understanding what those risks are and how they apply to you specifically can help you make informed choices about both your epilepsy, but also your lifestyle and your overall well-being, because it's important to look at it as a whole. So you're not just looking at that one bit of your life, your epilepsy, you're looking at your whole self and how you can make a difference to live well with the condition.
I'm really happy that you mentioned things like suicide and other forms of death, because I think most people, and certainly I previously was guilty of thinking that you just cover SUDEP, but you're talking about the broader picture in people's lives, those who are affected by epilepsy, and other causes of early death in those people. Is that what you mean? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So at SUDEP Action, while we are called SUDEP Action, we don't just focus on SUDEP. That's a leading cause, so that's why we lead a lot of our messaging with it. But we do help people prevent deaths from any epilepsy-related cause. And we also support families who have lost anyone due to epilepsy. It doesn't matter what the root cause of that may have been, because it's really important to cover that whole aspect of trying to prevent all epilepsy deaths, because epilepsy risks are so individual. And they can change over time for people as well. And because we don't know what causes SUDEP as well, you've got this really complicated picture out there. So we try and help people kind of do what they can to the risks that they may be facing at that precise moment in time. And that's why we recommend risk communication and talking about these epilepsy risks, as Jennifer said earlier, as being a really, really important way to learn about your risk, but also to do something about them.
I know, I love that. And you're actually making me think of a previous conversation I had with somebody saying that when you see your clinician, if you don't yet have, well, it's if you have controlled seizures and if you don't have controlled seizures, in fact, but I personally think that a connection between your neurologist, your a lot of the time, and you're a psychiatrist because of the mental health aspects of things, and then yourselves at SUDEP Action, just knowing those risks, all these things come together, kind of culminate to form a different situation for everybody, because epilepsy is never just epilepsy, or very rarely. It's always got other little vile factors coming in which impact your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about understanding all of these different elements and how they can change for people. And that's why we created our SUDEP and seizure safety checklist, which is a clinical tool to help any health professional who sees people with epilepsy to understand all of these different risks, so that when they're then meeting all of their various different patients, they can help have those conversations in a really personalized way. They can understand the evidence that's behind these risk factors, but then they can almost help apply, and they can help apply that evidence and talk about that evidence and why it's so important with the people that are sat in front of them, so that they can kind of almost pass that knowledge on and help empower people with epilepsy to do something about it.
That's the word, empower, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, empowering is exactly why we then also created our EPS1 app, because we thought, well, the clinicians having that conversation is just one side of this. We need to bring the people with epilepsy into this as well. It's their care, it's their body, it's their lives at the end of the day. So we want them to feel as confident as the clinicians do in understanding these risks and talking about these risks, and also keeping an eye on them themselves, because there's a bit of personal responsibility that needs to come along with this as well, that you need to know what risks are out there so that you can then make the choices that are best for you, or not, if the case may be. If you'd rather do something that maybe goes against what the evidence is saying, it's your choice, as long as you know what the potential impacts are. And we hope that people would do all that they can to reduce the risk, because we know the ultimate impact of not doing that. But it's all about helping to, as you say, empower people so that they can do what they can to reduce the risks and live well and longer and safely with epilepsy.
And have a life of quality as well. Quality
Absolutely.
rather than quantity, I always say that. So sorry, Jennifer, you're going to say something.
So yeah, I was going to say the empowerment is just such a crucial part of it, because day to day, all of us take risks in some kind of way. Every day is presented with risks. But for normal day-to-day activities, we know the consequences of a lot of risk. You know, if you go on a bike without a helmet, you could get hit by a car. And I understand now a lot of epilepsy risks, and I have to balance whether I want to do it or not. So, for instance, if I want to travel, it might mean less sleep, which could be dangerous to me, but I'm going to choose that because it will enrich my life. But if I don't know those dangers, then I'm not informed and I'm not actually empowered to make that decision for myself. And I think that's just so crucial for a lot of the self-monitoring that people can do, and a lot of what needs to be part of the clinician-patient communication, allowing people with epilepsy to understand that they are in control when a lot of your life feels very much out of control.
And that can be great for your mental health as well, empowering people in that way and having a sense of control. I mean, a lot of people I've spoken to, and I can include myself in this, if I feel out of control, I get upset, my anxiety gets higher, and I'm more likely to have a seizure, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
It's really good if you have these tools that you provide, just to give you that sort of a bit more self-confidence. And I think also for carers as well, because a lot of people with epilepsy might have learning disabilities too. So this is an empowering tool, and the information you provide is empowering for carers as well.
Yeah, definitely. We want anyone who's involved in kind of helping people with epilepsy to understand their condition, and we want them to know this information, to be able to feel like they can talk openly and honestly about this stuff, even though it's scary, even though it's potentially quite worrying and dark. Other conditions do this really well. So conditions like asthma, diabetes, cancer, they talk really frankly about risks associated with them. They talk about the risk of death that goes along with it. You wouldn't dream of not telling a cancer patient that there is a risk that they could die. It's just, you know, that comes as part of the care pathway, because that's what it is. It's a care pathway. And it hasn't historically been that way for people with epilepsy. Thankfully, things are getting a lot better with that. And we know that a lot more clinicians are now routinely and embedding this risk communication and risk information as part of their work. But we also know that there are some gaps where that just isn't quite happening as much as we'd like it to. And that's where our safety tools kind of come in to help try and plug those gaps and help fill the holes that are still in the system, just so we can kind of provide a bit of a safety net where things aren't quite as open and as honest as we'd like them to be.
Yeah, when my neurologist first said to me, by the way, your life expectancy isn't great, we had this blunt sort of talking relationship. I was like, wow, thank you for telling me, because I just didn't know. And I actually giggled because he always made me laugh. And I was like, that is what I needed to hear. And I felt respected as well. Like, he wasn't scared to tell me this. He could tell that I would appreciate understanding so that I could make key decisions in my own life, my own health, or to do with epilepsy. And that actually was one of the key pieces of information that led to me having my brain surgery, my, resections. So yeah, really, really important. So can you tell us, what does the next 1 to 5 years hold for you as an organisation? I'm getting a bit deep here, but yeah, no, what tell us.
So I suppose ultimately at SUDEP Action, our aim is to make sure that all people with epilepsy and their families and the clinicians that are involved in supporting people know about the risks that are linked to epilepsy. And we want people to feel confident in being able to discuss these risks, as we talked about, like with other long-term health conditions. Because if we can do that, people will then feel much more confident in reducing their risks. And hopefully by doing that and taking this action now, we're going to be able to prevent some of the epilepsy deaths that happen each year. And that's ultimately what we want. We want to prevent these deaths from happening. We know far too many of them are potentially avoidable. So let's take action where we can to try and prevent those deaths and work towards preventing all deaths, because ultimately we'd like to be out of a job. We don't want there to be any more epilepsy deaths happening. We don't want to have to be supporting more and more devastated and traumatized bereaved families. We want to be able to kind of stop these people from having to come to us, because the system is working in a way that is helping people with epilepsy live long and healthy lives.
So I'd say to everybody listening to this is talk about SUDEP, talk about epilepsy, talk about the risk, talk about the mental health side of things, and share this information with your loved ones. When you talk about epilepsy in general, I think we would, and I think I've said this to you before, Sammy, is like when we cross the road, we make key decision, we could get run over, right? We look both ways to minimize our risk, and then and we listen as well, and then assuming it's safe to cross, we do. And that's how I see living with epilepsy and trying to minimize my risk of SUDEP. And then I've done all that I can. Would you say that's quite a good way to look at it, I think?
Yeah, it's about doing what you can now to try and reduce your risks now, because we don't know when epilepsy deaths could happen. It could happen after a first seizure, it could happen after 105th seizure. We don't know, because of that mysterious element of what causes, not knowing what causes SUDEP at the moment. So it's doing what you can and keeping an eye on things as well. If you think that things are going off kilter, trust your instincts. You know you more than anyone else. So keep track of how things might be changing, for better or for worse. And if you need to seek earlier help, do so. Speak to your epilepsy clinician, whoever that may be. Have a look online at organisations such as SUDEP Action or other patient organisations' websites to know, is this right? Should this be happening? And see what you can do, and seek that help if you are concerned, because it really could make a difference.
Totally. It can be like the simplest changes to your life and your lifestyle that you need to minimize your risk. Okay, so tell us about the 23rd of October. I'm really looking forward to this date, SUDEP Action Awareness Day. What's going to happen? So
a lot is going to happen. So for those of you who don't know, SUDEP Action Day is an international awareness day where we raise awareness of SUDEP and epilepsy risks in the hope that we can spread the message among as many people as possible around the world. Last year we had over 100 organisations who took part, and this year we want even more people, organisations, health professionals to try and get involved and to help spread those messages around their kind of local and national networks. Our theme this year is Speak Up to Save Lives, because we know, just as we've talked about today, just how important it is that people with epilepsy know about these risks and know about SUDEP so that they can make these informed choices about their lifestyle and their epilepsy. So that's what we really want. We want people to have a look at our SUDEP Action Day website and to look at all the different ways that we've suggested people can get involved so that they really can start speaking up in the hope that we can save lives.
I wish I had one of your badges on now. I don't have one. I need to order one because it's
I
like
have a spare.
I don't mind.
We'll have to send one over.
Please, yeah, because even things such as this, you wear like a simple sort of badge and people go, what's that? And it's just like an opportunity to talk about SUDEP, I think. So actually, you've just said what people can do if they want to learn more about SUDEP, their risks and the organisation. I believe I left out a part about the professionals that you're working with, the clinicians. So when we did our video before, you mentioned Dr. Rohit Shankar. I mentioned another person who's involved. I think it might be important just for you quickly just to say a bit about that, because you're not just a charity that does some cool stuff behind the scenes, but you're actually working directly with people in medicine and science and research. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with international and UK research teams and networks, clinical networks, to help really understand what's going on with epilepsy risk, with SUDEP and with epilepsy deaths, so that we can bring that research down to the ground to really help people with epilepsy now. And as we've already talked about, we've got our SUDEP and seizure safety checklist and EPSMON research projects. And while they're physical tools that clinicians and people with epilepsy can use, they're also research projects where we pilot them in the background, we look at the data that we're gathering from them, and we use it to help inform and learn lessons from the risk communication that is happening. Where are the gaps? What can we do? How can we help people? And we work with Dr. Shankar, and we also work with Dr. Craig Newman and Dr. Brendan McLean on those two projects to really understand that how risk communication is evolving. And use of the checklist has shown that if you use it regularly, you use it repeatedly as part of your epilepsy risk conversations, clinicians can help people with epilepsy to reduce their risks over time. And that's been proven in research that has come out a couple of years ago. And so far, we've got over 1,000 clinicians using the checklist. So we really hope that more people will continue to kind of join the ranks and to start having a look at these conversations. And the same with EPSMON. Over 1,000 people currently use the EPSMON app. And we hope that they'll continue to do so that we can kind of learn from what they're telling us about their own risks so that we can help them in future.
Were you going to say something, Jennifer? Or...
Yeah, and then I was just going to say, on my side of things as the research assistant, we're working very closely on looking at COVID-19 and epilepsy at the moment with Dr. Arjun Sen at Oxford University. And so at the moment, we're still collecting data on anyone who wants to participate and share their experiences. And we really hope that it can contribute towards making epilepsy being taken more seriously in policy, in healthcare. And it really, so far what we're seeing at the moment, that it is highlighting that people with epilepsy, their conditions are deteriorating, mental health is worsening, which can act in a cycle, and the impact that we've seen on healthcare and lockdown and living on your own has had really profound impacts on people. So we're really excited to share some of the data that's come out on that, and we really encourage anyone who wants to put their voice forward to also get in touch. I'm sure there'll be a link on our website for that as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And it gives people affected by epilepsy something positive to do, to contribute not just to their own well-being, but to the well-being of others with epilepsy, to their families, etc., and to hopefully speak more to, I think, their MPs, politicians about this, to bring to make people just more aware of these risks and to better their lives. Gosh, how cheesy does that sound? But it's true, right?
It's true. It's completely true. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, both of you. Thank you so much for this. And we will provide contact details underneath the video. And yeah, we'll speak to you again soon, I do hope. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us.
Thanks, Torie.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.